So this is Nick Miller again, and I'm a realtor here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I'm a broker of my own brokerage. It's called Realty Side by Side, and I've worked with buyers and sellers in this area for the last 10 or so plus years. If you're thinking about selling your house sometime soon, I would love to help you do that, and I would like to provide you some insight about how I would go about that, as well as how I might be different than some of the other realtors that you might come across. So first things first, I guess, what's the bottom line for you? I know what it is. It's commissions. And we see a lot of times that people try to sell their houses on their own for sale by owner. And, a big part of that is the commissions. They just don't want to pay those seller commissions. So anyway, I understand that. And I realize that that's probably the most important question that you have. So just thought I'd break that down just a little bit for you. Typically for a listing agent, they're going to be paying both sides of that commission. So when they sell your house, they offer it on an MLS, and they get both a buyer's agent's as well as themselves, which is the seller's agent's commission. So there's two portions of that commission, and typically most realtors charge the same percentage for both sides of that. I did a quick little check on MLS just a few minutes ago, looked at about 5,000 listings, and the sort of average percentage rate there is about 3% for the buyer side of the transaction, and then for the seller side, like 87% of them, it's the same. For me, I don't do that. I'm charging less than that on the seller side. And when I checked, it looked like about 12% of us realtors out there do that. We don't charge both commissions the same. So anyway, I charge a little bit less. Some of that depends upon the location and the house condition, that kind of thing. Simply because it may take a lot more effort for some houses than others to be able to get it sold. But typically, I'm going to be less on your commission. So, would love to discuss that with you. Love to take a look at your house and let me know, and I can let you know what that would be. But thing to know, the most important thing to know about that is just because I may be charging less on commissions does not mean that I'm going to be doing less work for you. In fact, I work very, very hard to get houses sold for my sellers. And I put a lot of work into it, a lot of marketing, all kinds of upfront work, and I do help them try to educate my sellers as we go along, help you understand contracts and the negotiations, all the process that it takes to get that house through the sales process. So really important. Just so you know, I've sold about 15 homes to sellers in the last 18 months, about 18 homes to buyers. And it's a really challenging market out there for buyers. Sellers, not so much. Sellers, you're in pretty good shape. But at the same time, it's important to be working with a realtor like me who's worked both sides of that deal, because it's important to understand how to negotiate from a buyer's perspective in order to be a good seller and to be able to be a good listing agent. And I've had to deal with lots of various negotiations with respect to multiple and competing offers. So I can help with that. I can help with the strategy to get through that, both as a seller, as a seller's agent, and to understand the buyer side of it. So that's a really important thing. One of the most important things, and one of the things that I spend a fair amount of diligence on, is making sure that you get a buyer that can actually purchase that home, that can actually close and fund. And so I do some diligence there. I always interview my the lenders, and we make sure that lender and that buyer can come through for you before we ever accept an offer. So I'm always, if I have multiple offers, doesn't matter. I'm going to call all those lenders. I'm going to find out whether or not that buyer can buy that house, and then we'll make a recommendation as to which offer to accept, because it doesn't matter how high or how good that offer is. If they can't buy that house, if they don't have the financial means to do it, it's no good. And so it's really important to not fall through on the day before closing or the day of closing or whatever. So it's really important. That's one of the most important things about selling a house, is getting a good buyer. So some other things to know about my selling process is typically when I sit down with a seller, I do a detailed analysis of their home and the market that they're in. The condition of the home makes a lot of difference as to how well it's going to sell and how to price it. And we can talk about things like what are the aspects in the homes that are competing in that market that bring the highest price. And you may say, well, I want to get the highest price. Well, okay, then we need to look at what are these other competing homes have? What do they have for features, for instance, to be able to drive that price? And then you might make the decision that, okay, well, maybe I don't want to put $20,000 into wood floors to do this. So, we can look at the alternatives to that. But anyway, we look very closely at the condition of the home and the features of the home, and try to decide exactly how to sell it, as far as getting a good strategy for marketing it and pricing it. Pricing is really important, of course. And really, one of the most important things is to understand and to understand what you want out of the deal. In some cases, I've talked to sellers, and like, for instance, I've worked with some divorce cases and also some estate sale kind of cases, and I mean, they just want to get out. They just want to be able to sell the house, and it doesn't have to be the highest price, and they don't want to sit on the market for 45 days waiting for a slightly higher price. They want to get out of that deal. So, I mean, it's important for me to understand that. I need to understand what every seller wants and how to approach that, and how to build a strategy and a marketing plan around fulfilling those needs for them. Some of the features that I do when I do the analysis of a home, I'm always looking at the schools. It's important to understand if that's a great selling feature. For some homes, it's not, but for a lot of homes, it truly is, especially in the DFW area. A lot of great schools, and it drives people to your house. Subdivisions, the important features of the subdivisions, some of them have pools and playgrounds, and some of them have nearby parks, entertainment, all kinds of venues. It's really important to kind of point that out, especially to people, like, for instance, that are coming from California or from other state. They don't know anything about this area, so it's really important to market that with each and every house. Sometimes we take that for granted. We drive around and we go, oh yeah, I know there's so-and-so restaurants and so-and-so movie theaters and all that stuff. Well, that's great for us, but for somebody coming from California or from New Jersey or wherever it is, they don't know. So it's important to get those aspects into the marketing documentation, and I try to build that in. I've got another video that I'd like to show some examples of how I do that, and I'd really encourage you to go look at that other video as well. My other selling video, to try to look and see examples of some of the marketing tools and approaches that I use. But anyway, for each and every house, we look at all kinds of things to try and make sure that we know how to market it to attract prospective buyers, and then to negotiate that as well. Energy efficiencies, that's a key thing. Looking for what kind of efficiencies the home has, the various features and amenities of the homes that they might have, bedrooms, baths, of course, that's pretty standard. Everybody's looking for a certain number of beds and baths. But then there's also the upgrades. There's great features like patios and pergolas and pools, and there's just a whole world of features and amenities out there that we want to be able to market. We don't want to take anything for granted, and we want to make sure that prospective buyer has a very clear understanding of everything that this house has to offer. So that's important. It's important for me to do my diligence, which I do. I dig into everything and make sure that I can document all those things that we can market. It's really important for the sale of the house. I do use a marketing plan, a 40-point marketing plan, kind of a strategy, which I am happy to share with all my sellers. It'll give them a really good understanding of the process and the things that we go through to get to the listing, and then ultimately to the sale. Then I use a whole bunch of various marketing venues. Once we get the house ready, I use a professional photographers to be able to make sure that we put it in the very best light that's possible. I don't use my own poor camera skills to do that. I get a professional photographer to do that, and it's really important to use a professional photographer. I mean, the shadows and other things in homes is different than just a portrait photograph of somebody. It's really critical to get a photographer who knows how to shoot homes, and then to be able to produce that into some kind of virtual tour and video as well. I mean, it is important to be able to do the very best job we can do that, because that's the very first thing that everybody sees when they go looking at a house online. They look at the pictures. That's what they're looking at. They're not looking at much verbiage. If that first picture doesn't catch their attention, they're on to the next one. And so it's important. It's very important to be able to show that house in the very best light that we can. And I do that. I also use all kinds of different syndications, internet marketing, e-flyers and e-marketing, social media, Facebook and LinkedIn and Craigslist, and I mean all kinds of different venues that we use to get your house out there, get it sold. Also, I do some of the standard grunt work, I guess if you want to call it that. Open houses. Always have an open house on the very first weekend that we put the house on the market. We put signs out and obviously lots of different flyers and all that kind of stuff. I use a showing service so that there's no bogging down anything. And I also reverse prospect on everything. So reverse prospecting is the idea of going back and figuring out who's looking at your house and contacting them. And I'm very proactive about that. I'm proactive about dealing with the realtors that may be bringing their people to the house. I work hard. I don't just put a sign in the yard and hope that it's going to happen. And even in this environment, you see that a lot of the multiple and competing homes that are out there, you can tell that the realtor, they just planned on it selling and don't really have to do any work. Some of them don't even have pictures in there. And I'm just not that way at all. I put my 100% or 110 or 120% into it, no matter if I think it's going to sell in 30 seconds or if it's going to take 30 days. It's the same effort for me, and I have a certain just standard that I'm not gonna break, and I'm gonna do the very best job I can to market that house. It's a product, and it needs to be marketed in the best light that I can. So anyway, just so you know that, I mean, I use all kinds of venues and means to be able to market that house. Once we get started, I'll make sure you have a timeline. You understand exactly what needs to happen from day one all the way to the day that we close. And so that's important too. I think people really get bogged down with the process and get worried and concerned, and you don't need to do that, because I will help you. I'll help you get through that process. I do distinguish myself from other realtors by providing exceptional service and guidance and responsiveness. One of the most important things that I discover when I'm working with my buyer clients is that I often never hear from a listing agent. Even though I have a prospective buyer that may be interested in their house, I don't get messages. I don't get any communications of any kind. Sometimes I have a hard time getting a hold of them on the phone, even if I need to talk to them. And I'm just not like that. I'm always available. I pick up the phone. I take texts, emails, everything. I'm always working hard to get these houses sold. There's no stone unturned, no prospective buyer untouched. And that's just what I'm about. So you can check me out further on my website, realtysidebyside.com. Especially you can look there at the testimonies. Also on Zillow, I have some super ratings out there and several good testimonies as well. I'm a premier agent, and I operate with the utmost integrity and professionalism. I am a person of faith, and I believe that home decisions are huge life decisions that require a superior guidance. So I'm also extremely responsive and available for questions at any time. Again, like I said, I'd love to work with you. Give me a chance, and I'd love to help you sit down and talk to you about your house and how we can get it sold today. So anyway, check me out. Take a look at the other video that I have out there that has to do with the tools and some of the testimonies and some examples of what I've done with other houses. And I'd love to sit down and talk to you about your house today. So anyway, be blessed, and I hope to hear from you soon. Take care.